Sixth grade, lesson 12.6 is measures of center. A measure of center is a single value that's used to describe the middle of a data set. So you get all these sets of information, these pieces of data. The very middle of it would be the measure of center. And it can be a really useful way to kind of summarize the information that you have, the data set, especially if you have a really large set of data. If you have a lot of information, it kind of gives you an idea where the middle point is. And this lesson focuses in on the measures of center of mean, median, and mode. Mean, median, and mode. Those are the three things you're going to learn as three different measures of center, three different ways, I should say, to measure kind of the center data point. Three different possibilities. We'll start by talking about the mean, and then we'll talk about median and mode. Let's start off with the unlock the problem. Kara made a paper airplane. She flew her airplane 6 different times, and recorded how long it stayed in the air during each flight. The times in seconds for the flights are 5.8 seconds, 2.9 seconds, 6.7 seconds, 1.6 seconds, 2.9 seconds, and 4.7 seconds. What are the mean, median, and mode of the data? Let's talk about the mean first. So the mean is an average of all of the numbers put together. So if you recall, to find an average, I would add up all of the numbers in the set, and then I would divide by how many numbers were sitting in the set. And so I remember mean means average because it's the meanest one of the three. It's the one that makes you have to do the most work. It's so mean. Average is add them all up and then divide by how many pieces of information were in the data set. So I would take all of these numbers, add them together, 5.8 plus 2.9 plus 6.7 plus 1.6 plus 2.9 plus 4.7. They lined them up all there for me. Then I would divide them by how many numbers were in the set. That's the amount of flights, right? 6 times, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I would divide them by 6, the total by 6, because there are 6 values in the data set. All right, and so I went ahead and added, oopsie, I did not mean to do that. I went ahead and added all of these values together. They added together to be 24.6, and I will now divide that by 6. And I end up with the answer of 4.1. So the average of all of these numbers is 4.1. We add them all together. Now, keep in mind, this is 4.1. If it's an average or a measure of center of all these numbers, then there should be some numbers above it and some numbers below it, because it's trying to find kind of the middle of where all of that data was at. This was above, this below, above, below, below, and above. You could see it's almost half and half, because that average, that mean, is a measure of about the center area of all of the data. So to find the mean, the average, add all of the information up and divide by how many data pieces are there. It's the meanest one. It's the one that takes a little more work. The next two don't take as much work, and they're another way you can get a measure of center. So another way to get a measure of center is the median. Now, before we even read that, don't even read it, block it. Before we even read that, I want you to think about driving down a freeway. There's one side of traffic going one direction, and then there's like a concrete barrier, and then there's another set of traffic going the opposite direction. What is the name of that concrete barrier that's in between the two different lanes of traffic on a freeway? If you said median, you're right. It's the median. It's right in the middle, right? Right in the middle of the freeway to separate the two different ways of traffic. So that's what helps me remember what median means. It's the number that is right in the middle. So what you would do, the median is the middle value when the data are written in order. So the first thing we have to do is order all of our data pieces from the smallest little bitty one and work our way up to the biggest one. And once we have our biggest one, so they ordered it. They took all of these data and they did the little one, 1.6, then 2.9, 2.9 again, 4.7, 5.8, and 6.7 being the highest value. So once they ordered it, then you find the middle number. That's it. It's the one in the middle, right? Now, if it's an odd set of numbers, you're going to have even number here, and one little number being its very own self right there in the middle, and there's your median, nice and easy. If it's an even set of numbers, there are 6 here, then we have this half and this half, these 3 and these 3. So if that happens, we just need to find the number that falls right in between these two middle numbers. Now, sometimes that's easy to see, like if it's a 4 and a 6, you're like, oh, well, 5 is right in between there, so 5 is your median. In this case, it's harder to tell, so you can just add those two together and divide by 2 to find the average of the two, right? So 2.9 plus 4.7, and when I add those together, I get 7.6. So we added 2.9 plus 4.7, so we can find that middle number that falls between them. It wasn't as obvious here. We get 7.6. We divide that by 2. That brings the average between them, and that value is 3.8. 7.6 divided by 2 is 3.8. Now notice, measure of center of this data set as a mean or average is 4.1. Measure of center as a median is 3.8. That's the number that's right in the middle. You'll see that these numbers end up fairly close to each other because they're both just different ways of trying to find a middle-ish area of what all of these numbers are representing. So 4.1, $4.10, is not a whole lot different than $3.80, $3.08, right? 3.8. Those are close numbers. So your mean, your median, and your mode might be pretty close. And your mean and median usually are very close. The mode can go either way, and I'll talk to you about why. Okay, so the mode, before I read it to you, I'm going to tell you how I remember this one. I have all these little tricks for remembering these so I can sort them out in my brain. Mode is like if you had a cold and you wanted more of something. Can I have some mode? I want some mode, please. Right? I want to have some more, but I have a stuffy nose, so it sounds like mode. Mode is kind of the one, it talks about the data piece that is repeated more, or the most, I should say. So if you have pieces of data repeated, that would be the mode, the one that is most repeated. Sometimes you have repeated numbers, sometimes you don't. And if you don't have repeated pieces, then you just say there's no mode. But if you do have repeated values, the one that repeats the most often is the mode. Okay, so the number in this set, when you look at our set here, 2.9 shows up twice. And all the other values only show up once. So 2.9 is the mode. Now notice this value is not quite as close as these are to each other because it's just the repeated value. Generally, your numbers can be fairly close, not as close as these are going to be, but it'll be very close because if the more repeats you have, the more that's going to affect the add and divide by. The more it's going to affect showing up in the middle of the data set. If you have a number that repeats frequently, then it's getting a lot of representation, that number is. So it's going to skew those numbers. So the mode is a measure of center, but always isn't going to give the most accurate center. In this case, it doesn't really give us a super accurate center. It's sort of, it's almost 3. This is almost 4, and this is almost 4. So mean is the meanest one. It makes you add everything up and divide by how many are there, the average. Median is just like on the freeway, the number that is right in the middle. Remember though, you have to line up the values from least to greatest before you do that. Line up out values from least to greatest and then find the median, the middle. And then mode, the one that's repeated mode, the one that you see mode of, you see more of them, is the repeater. Let's look at an example. We'll see it again, and that should help let things fall into place. We'll probably look at 2 examples. You can pause or stop when you feel like it clicks, but I'll give you 2 more examples of this. So Mrs. O'Donnell's class has a fundraiser for a field trip to a wildlife preservation. 5 of the donations are $15, $25, $30, $28, and $27. Find the mean, the median, and the mode of the donations. Okay, well, to find the mean, remember that's the meanest one, finding the average. Add all of the information together, all of the values of the money together, and then divide by how many data pieces there are. There's 5 of them. So I'm going to add all of these up. 15 25, 30, 28, and 27. And there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pieces of data. So once I have those added up, I will divide by 5 to get the mean, the average. And when added all together, it equals 125. Then I will divide by 5. 125 divided by 5 is 25. So the mean of the data, the center measure of the center-ish of all of these data is about $25-ish. There will be some that are more, some that are less, one that is right on 25, right on the mean. Now to find the median, I will first need to order the numbers from least to greatest. So let's see, the smallest one looks like 15, then 25, then 27, 28, and 30. Okay. The number that is in the middle, the median, the one, the freeway middle, the median is 27. It's the one right in the middle. Remember earlier when I said if it's an odd number, it's nice and easy to find the median because there's 2 on that side, 2 on that side, right? And then the one right in the middle. If it's an even number, we have to find the average of the 2 that are in the middle if it's not obvious what number falls right in between the 2. So if you have a long set of numbers, I'll tell you that what I just start doing is once I order them smallest to greatest, I cross off the ends until I meet in the middle. Cross off to the 2 ends, then the next ends until I get to the middle point. So with a small set of numbers, it was easy to see. A long set of numbers, it helps me to cross them off reverse on the opposite ends and work my way in to find the median. Median is 27. Not too far off of this. Why are they a little bit different? If you notice, our mean was 25, even though that's not quite at the middle. But there were 3 numbers bigger, but they're not a whole lot bigger. And there was this one number smaller that's 10 smaller. So that pulls the mean towards the smaller side a little bit more, where the median is just telling you the middle of all the numbers. So it doesn't take into account that, yes, there were 3 bigger than that and 1 smaller than that. It doesn't take into account that this one was much smaller than that, where the mean does. Okay, if all of the values in the data set occur with equal frequency, now we're looking for that mode, right, the repeated one, then the data set has no mode. There isn't one single number that repeats, so we have no mode. No mode. If we had a repeating one, then we would say that's the mode. If there was 2 27s, 27. If there was 2 30s, 30. If there was 2 30s but 3 25s, 25 is my mode, whichever repeats the most. Okay, probably a lot of you are starting to feel like, okay, I think this makes sense. I'll give one more example, and if you are already getting it, you can stop the video unless you feel like just hearing my voice for a little longer for another example. All right, let's talk about Keith's story in example 2. Keith surveys his classmates about how many brothers and sisters they have. 6 of the responses, so he asked his classmates, 6 of the responses were 1, 3, 1, 2, 2, and 0, about how many siblings they had. One person had 1 sibling, another had 3 siblings, 1 sibling, 2 siblings, 2 siblings, and then a 0 sibling person. Find the mean, median, and mode of the data set. Mean is the meanest one. That's the average, where we add up all the information and divide by how many are in the data set. So I've written in the numbers 1, 3, 1, 2, 2, 0, 1, 3, 1, 2, 2, 0. I will add those together. That's 9. And then I will divide by how many pieces of numbers are in the data set. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 numbers are in the data set. So I'll divide by 6. 9 divided by 6 is 1.5 or 1.5. Same thing, right? 5 dimes, 50 cents, half $1. 1.5. That's our mean. So the average amount of siblings our classmates or Keith's classmates have is 1.5. Now, it was average, right? We know that there's not a half sibling running around. That would be kind of messy. But there's about 1.5 siblings on average the class has. If we wanted to find the median, we would order the numbers here from smallest to largest. So I have the 0 is the smallest. I cross them off as I go so I don't get confused. 1 and 1. 2 and 2, and 3. The number of data values is even. So, because we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of them. So if we were, you would notice this too if you were doing that, cross off the edges, each edge until you get to the middle to find the median, the middle one. There's that one, then that one, and oh, I ended up with 2 numbers in the middle, not just one. So I could, they have us find the average of them. I could, if I recognize right away, what's the number that falls exactly in between 1 and 2? 1.5, right? So I could just use that if I recognize it. If not, I'll put 1 and 2, the 2 numbers that are right in the middle, add them together for 3. I'll divide by 2 because there's 2 numbers there, and I will get 1.5 or 1.5. And in this case, the mean and the median ended up being the same number. Sometimes that happens. They're usually at least very close, or sometimes they are the same. The mode isn't always as close, so let's see how the mode turns out here. The data values, so we're on mode now. The data values 2 and 1, 1 and 2 show up an equal amount of times. 1 and 2 appear twice in the set. If 2 or more values appear in the data set the most number of times, then the data set has 2 or more modes. This one has 2 modes. The mode is 1 and the mode is 2 because those numbers repeat the most. They're tied for the most, right? And it turns out, between 1 and 2, again, would be pretty close to our mean and our median in this case. Kind of in between, right? So these numbers kind of played out as measures of center. They played out similar all the way through. So that's it. This lesson is just all about practicing measures of center. So you do the mean, would be averaging it all together. Add everything up, divide by how many are in the data set. The median, line them up from least to greatest. What number would be right in the middle? And the mode, which number repeats the most often. That's it. Those are those. You'll get a little practice in. This will be nice and solid in your head.